do is I'm going to kind of introduce it. And what I'm going to do, I'm first going to ask about where you were born, something about your family. Kind of go through, oh yeah, oh good. Kind of go through your childhood memories and stuff and what got you to the Army and some of your experiences. If I ask questions you do not want to answer, you have, of course, have the. I'm sure you would tell me anyway. I don't want to talk about this. You know, what I'd like to do at the end, we'll have some paperwork to sign that gives you us permission to use your interview for research, to use it to quote it or whatever. Okay, so I'll do an introduction and then and this is the 31st. I better change my date or I'll forget, 31st. Okay, Blake, we ready?
Ready.
Go. Today is August the 31st, 1996. We're in McLean, Virginia. I'm speaking to Carl J. Lyons. My name is Charlie Henson. We're at the 50th Annual 12th Armored Division Reunion. I'd first like for you to give me your full name and your address and the date of your birth.
Carl John Lyons, 3550 Schertzinger Road, Hilliard, Ohio. Born April 20th, 1924.
Tell me about your parents, your mother and father, their backgrounds.
Okay, my father was born in Hoopeston, Illinois. He was a mechanical engineer, went to the University of Illinois, served in World War I, and he had a great number of jobs during the Depression. And the Lyons family came from Sweden in 1865. How they got the word Lyons, I don't know, because it was originally Lejon. And then when they came over, they Americanized it, I guess. My mother was from Providence, Rhode Island, and her mother was a Chubbuck that came to this country in 1635, along with the Lincolns from England, and settled in Massachusetts. And my mother turned out to be a gym teacher, and that gives you some background.
Okay. Do you have brothers and sisters?
I have one brother, Ivan Clyde Lyons. He lives near Chicago, Illinois.
Okay. Tell me, which town were you born in?
Chicago, Illinois.
Okay, Chicago. Okay. Tell me about the memories that you have of your mother and your father, who they were like, what they were like, the things that the things about them that made you who you are.
Well, I suppose I had the most impact from my mother, because she taught me that the only way I was ever going to get ahead was to be smarter than the next fellow, because we lived in at least 6 different locations from 1936 on. And on the other hand, my father gave me an orientation towards engineering, and I became a chemical engineer. But one of the things I remember well was working when I was in the, let's say, the 8th grade, 7th grade. I could pick raspberries all day and make $2, or mow a lawn all day long and get $2. But that was to give me some money to go to college. And so they did teach us hard work, and that brains were what was going to make a difference.
So education was very important.
Yes.
To them. Were they, in discipline and stuff, were they pretty strict or pretty loose with you boys?
Well, we were expected to behave properly. And that was considered a part of growing up. I don't think we were disciplined in the usual sense of the word very much, because it wasn't necessary. We just knew this was the way you had to behave. I realize that that's a shock to you younger generations.
Okay. Tell me the one teacher in your school, elementary, high school, the teacher that stands out in your mind, or some experiences.
Well, in the 7th grade, I had a teacher that was, I can't remember her name, but she gave us discipline and really worked at teaching us. Of course, there was one teacher there that I wished I could remember her name. She made a big impact on me because she was in charge of the singing, groups of singers. And we were singing one day in a group, and she walked up and down the line and she said, "Don't you sing. You can't sing." And I haven't sung since. And music has never been a thing of my life. Oh, I can sing, but it irritates everybody.
Okay. Tell me about your high school years and what led you into your military experience.
Well, I went to regional high school in Red Bank, New Jersey, and there I was particularly interested in chemistry and math, and the math teacher had been from Penn State, and he advised me if I went away to college to be at least 300 miles from home so I couldn't go home every weekend, and I would learn to be on my own. And that's how, when my father took me around various universities, I ended up going to Penn State and was there 2 years before going into the service.
Tell me was there one specific day? Tell me about the day that you realized that the war was going to happen and you would be a part of it. Your feelings that day, or if it was a gradual knowing.
Well, I didn't know what part I was going to play. I enlisted in I think it was fall of 42 in the ASTP program, because I thought that with my college education and all, I could make the biggest contribution. And then I was called up in, I guess it was the summer of, or late spring of 43, because college students weren't taken right away.
Where did you do your ASTP training?
Well, I went to Camp Venn in Texas for basic training, and then they shipped me to Texas Tech for the ASTP training, which was more engineering. And then they finally did away with that because of the invasion in Europe, and I joined the 12th Armored in the summer of 44.
Tell me about your experiences at Tech and the ASTP program.
It was just like going to college. There were students there, so we had a pretty good time, and I learned a lot about Texans, had some rattlesnake to eat, and, something else, grasshoppers, a few other things that I'd never heard of before. At least I got indoctrinated into some of the peculiarities.
Tell me about the day. Was there, tell me about finding out that the ASTP program was going to be closed.
Well, I wasn't surprised, and I never gave it much thought at the time. And I can't remember anything. I said, well, we're going to ship you off, and some of them went some places and others went other places. We just figured it was part of the rigmarole.
Okay, so there wasn't really a disappointment or...
No.
Okay. Were y'all treated in the ASTP program, was it set up with the same kind of, like did you have officers over you? Was it set up like the military?
I can't even remember. I think there was somebody that was in charge of getting things organized, and they retained some of the military discipline and the parades and this sort of thing, but I can't remember much about it.
Okay. Did y'all wear uniforms? Or?
Oh, yeah.
You did? Was it a normal Army uniform?
Yes.
Okay. So you went to Camp Barkley?
And then I was shipped to Camp Barkley.
Okay. Tell me about getting to Camp Barkley, how they got you there, kind of how you felt and what you saw as you were going into Abilene, Texas, Camp Barkley.
Well, we went by train. We got there in the middle of the night. So I didn't see much of the place.
Okay, what unit were you placed in? Did they give you a choice when you got to Barkley, or had you already been given your orders?
No, they gave me a choice.
Tell me about that and who you talked to.
Well, I don't know what officer, but they looked at my record, and they gave me a choice. I could either be attached to their medical battalion because of my chemistry background, or I could be attached to a machine gun squad because of my record in basic training. And I decided that I owed it to my family and whoever came after me to say that I really fought. So I just selected the machine gun squad.
And you were placed in what company and unit?
Company A, 1st Platoon Machine Gun Squad.
Who were the other men in your hutment? Do you remember? Anything specifically about the group of men that were together?
You mean the ASTPers?
No, when you got to Barkley. Your platoon at Barkley.
Oh, I remember a number of them, but mostly just the ones in the squad, and a few others. I have a close friend, Jensen, that ended up in the mortar squad of the 3rd Platoon, I think it was, and a few others. But in a sense, looking back on it, I think I was putting in time because we ASTPers hadn't lived with all the rest of the fellas, and they all had their social groups and one thing or another, so in a sense we were outsiders, just meandering along.
Did somebody, one specific person, kind of take you under his wing and kind of show you the ropes?
Well, the sergeant kept us pretty well in line and showed us all that we were supposed to be doing as a machine gun squad. I suppose that you could say he took us under.
What was his name? Tell me about your sergeant.
Kelly.
And who was he? What was he like as a man and as your sergeant?
Well, he was, in the maneuvers and all, he was pretty nice. He expected a lot. And he was a much older man than I was at the time, and and I really didn't get to know him like I'd really like to know somebody, you know. Because at that time of my life, I wasn't as perceptive as I am now.
Okay. Tell me about the camaraderie that you established at Barclay with your squad.
Well, there wasn't much, because the ASTPers were new, and there was a number there. Fuchs was from ASTP, and there was another fella. Can't remember his name. But when we go on leave, or weekends or something, I don't think I ever went with any of the fellows in the squad. Maybe it's because they didn't give them out that way.
What was Abilene like? Do you remember about Abilene? Did you go to the USO and
Yes.
some of those activities?
Went there, and I went to up the road, where the women were training to be pilots.
Oh, Ty?
Huh?
Ty Air Force Base?
I guess so. It was up the road is all I know.
Yeah. Sweetwater.
And then one time we went, I hitchhiked to Clovis, because I had a fraternity brother that was was in the Air Force there. That's where I got my first ride in an airplane. But you could hitchhike around, you know.
Okay, tell me about some of the training that you experienced in Barclay.
Well, we went on maneuvers a number of 2 or 3 times, and you got somewhat of a feel for what was expected, because they were. The only thing I remember was real well was just before we would go overseas, they had an exercise to train the officers or put them through a test. The officers are small units, and some other units would be trying to capture these officers. And in the middle of the night, and the assistant squad leader was a man by the name of Poplarin. I think he was from Hawaii. Anyway, I was on guard duty, and he started coming over me, and I asked him for the password, and he didn't give it to me. And I said, Poplarin, you better give me the password, or I'm supposed to shoot you. So I shot him. Blank, of course.
Oh, blank, okay.
But the officers were pretty nervous about that whole exercise, because it was going to make or break them, quote unquote.
Yeah. When you left Barclay, were you still a private?
Yes, PFC.
PFC.
Because the ASTPers were made PFCs, I think.
Okay. Tell me about when you found out that you were going to be leaving Barclay and it was time to head towards Europe. Or did you know where you were going when you left Barclay exactly?
Well, all we knew was we were going to go to east and we ended up in Camp Shanks, New York. But we expected that anyway.
Was it a relief to get started? Or how
No,
did y'all
just part
feel?
part of what one would expect.
Okay. Did you get one of the guys that got a leave to go to New York City?
Oh yeah, I got 2. Because the first day I went, my folks lived in Red Bank, New Jersey, and you could take from Camp Shanks, you could take the train down, and in Jersey City you'd take another train and put you in Red Bank, or a little Silver, right block from where my folks lived. But they had a hurricane, so when I got there, they didn't send me. I called them up and told them I was coming, and then I wasn't coming. So I found out my aunt was there. An aunt from Illinois was a salesperson. So, and it was raining and all, and I went to her hotel, and she had the people take care of my uniform, press it, and dry it off. The next night I got somebody else's pass. This time I couldn't go there, so I went to New Brunswick, where I had an aunt and an uncle. And they drove me from New Brunswick to Red Bank. And then my folks drove Jensen and I back to Hoboken, where we got the train back. But they had a heck of a time during this hurricane business.
So y'all, what day did y'all leave New York City? Do you remember that date? Okay. Tell me about the ship, the ride over to Europe, to England.
Well, we were on the Empress of Australia, right at the waterline. And the area where we were, or my group was put, didn't have any bunks or anything. It just a room about half the size of this one. And I guess we were sleeping on, others slept in tiered bunks, maybe 10 in a tier. And when you went down to get the food, it was operated by the English. The smell was something out of this world. So they did have a PX aboard, so everybody survived on candy bars.
So y'all didn't like that food that the English
Well,
made?
it didn't exactly excite one. Whatever they were doing, stewing up.
Do what? Stewing up?
Whatever they were stewing.
Oh, okay. Okay. What were your feelings? What was your general feeling as you got to England?
Well, I figured this is what we're supposed to be doing.
Were you excited to get going, to get started?
Not particularly. I was a little bit, we got a number of us were a little excited when we landed in England to see this different country. And, but I guess I figured this was the norm for the course.
What is, when you think about, you went to Tidworth, are there any memories that really stand out in your memory of your experience in Tidworth, England? Tell me about it.
Well, I got exposed to honey buckets. You know what they are.
But describe it for us, so we'll have this.
Well, we were in tents of, I don't know how many, 8 to 10 people, and they had a bucket outside. So when you had to go to John, they went in the bucket, and the farmer picked it up in the morning to fertilize his fields. The other experience was, this is to give you a perspective on me. I got a leave to go to London. And of course it was blackout time, and you know, those rockets were coming over and all this stuff. But anyway, this buddy and I asked people where you went in London and all in the middle of the night, and everybody said, we'll go down to Piccadilly Square. So we went down there, and it's jammed full of people all over the place. And then the biggest surprise that I've ever remember was I heard some guy in the middle of this crowd shouting at the top of his lungs, "Condoms for sale! Condoms for sale!" As you can guess, I was a little naive at that point in life. I was exposed to condoms, don't understand me, but I didn't expect you to be selling them in the middle of a whole bunch of crowds at the top of your lungs. And then some woman come up to me and says, "That guy just wanted to take me, and he weighed, I don't know how many stones. How about you?" Well, I didn't have any. By today's standards, I'm only 10 years behind.
Okay. Is there any, in your training, y'all's training at Tidworth, how long was that? Were y'all at Tidworth before you sailed?
Oh, I think we were there a matter of weeks, less than a month, I think.
So you just got your equipment ready and?
Yes.
Okay, tell me about going down to the channel, getting on the ships and going across the channel.
Well, I can't remember much about that. We went across in a normal ship. The only thing I remember about that was when they got into Le Havre, where they bring these, not rowboats, but some boats alongside to take you from the big boat to the shore, and you had to walk down stairs these portable stairs they put on the side of the ship. And I was carrying a machine gun at that time, and when I saw that little boat down there at the bottom, and the waves going like this and this, I got scared to death. That's the first time I really got scared, because I figured, man, if I slip, I'll be right between the two and they'll pump me. Fortunately, I didn't.
You're going into Le Havre. First time really that close enough to think, okay, we're here, fixing to start. Tell me about that experience.
All it was rainy and muddy. And we got into trucks and went down the line, and then we did get our first view of what the Europeans were like. Because there was a woman alongside the road going to the John, which was unusual for me.
What was the condition of Le Havre when y'all landed?
Well, it showed some wreckage around and that sort of thing, but we couldn't see very much because everything was blacked out. And we got on trucks, and they took us to Offay.
Okay. How long was it before you personally saw action, from the time you landed at Le Havre till the first day? And tell me about the first day that you were in real action.
Well, it was about a month, I think, because our equipment, somebody said it was given to another division, and had an interesting experience while we were there at Offay, because there were leaves, people going here, there, and every place. And I got a leave to Rouen, I think, and I was amazed at the price of everything. That they had all these goods around, because of course being a war, I thought, what the hell, I don't have these, that's not food, but other thing. And they had to get permission for me to get a drink of some kind that they said was real good, but they voted that I could have the drink. Anyway, that night, there was a lot of excitement in our camp, because one of the officers had stolen a Jeep from the English Army. And I thought, well, what are we doing that for? But we did. So they were busy painting it and all that. And then finally we got orders to move up to wherever, with Nancy, and through the Alsace, and went into combat about December the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, I think.
Was that at the Maginot Line?
Well, before, it was this side of the Maginot Line.
Okay.
In Beining and Rohrbach.
What's it like to go in the morning of...
Well, it wasn't in the morning, we went in at night.
At night, okay.
Well, then I got my first thing I'll always remember. I think our platoon got lost, meandering around in these trucks, half-tracks, you know. Anyway, people came to the end of a place where they were supposed to disembark and then walk into this town, which was a mile away. And everybody was excited then, and kind of maybe scared, because they were busy giving the half-track drivers names and addresses of their parents and everything. If anything happened, send them a letter there, and all this went on and on and on. And then we were calmed down, because there was a lieutenant standing in the middle of the road. Now I want you men to settle down. You'll walk up there a mile, and you'll see 2 tanks destroyed and 6 dead Germans, so don't let them disturb you. My only thought was, who the hell's worried about the dead ones? I'm worried about those ones that are alive that are shooting the stuff out of there. I'll never forget that. I thought it was, in retrospect, I would call it stupid, but at the time I said, hell, I'm not worried about those dead ones.
Yeah. You went into the town. Was your orders to take the town?
No, we had half the town, and the Germans had the other half. And because we got lost, we were the last ones into town, so we were in the very first building on the left as you go in. And that's where the machine gun squad was put.
Where you were quartered?
Well, quartered, or we were put in that, we had a guard had to guard the house.
Okay, walk me through some of those first days of combat.
Well, you've read my story.
I know, but who's going to hear this tape has not heard your story? I've read it, but you have to act like I haven't.
Well, the first day we were there was a tank destroyer sitting out in the main street looking down this hill, because we had this hill and went in the valley and up the other side, and the Germans had the other side of where this hill town was, and some joker from the tank destroyers came in and made some comments to us, and Gardner and I were on guard duty, and he said, "Well, what are you doing with this German weapons?" I said, "We were not touching them. They might be booby-trapped." So this guy picks up one of the rifles and flips the bolt and shoots it. A minute later, my squad sergeant comes into the floor, out of the basement, white as a sheet. He says, "What's going on up here?" Well, I said, "This guy just..." Well, the bullet had ricocheted down there and killed Wolfhope, a member of the squad. So the captain did raise Cain with, I guess, with this other outfit that let a man do that. And then about the second day, we were going to take this binding barracks, they called it, where the Germans occupied that part of the hill, and we were in the forward part of that, and we walked down the street, muddy, over dead American shoulders, and one thing or another, and then we got scattered off to the right in the backyards of the French houses, and then the Germans opened up on us. I was lucky; I was behind a pile of stones, because when they let loose, that's when I first learned about the German machine guns. Their machine guns go brrr, whereas ours go bump, 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 bump. In other words, they shoot 2 or 3 times as fast as we do. So we start crawling up the hill, and tanks were with us. And I think a tank hit a mine or something, blood blew his half track. But seemed like every, maybe 20 yards, the French houses had these wire fences. So you had to crawl on, and I was carrying a machine gun, because then by then they had made me one of the machine gunners in the squad. And about halfway through, I figured I was too damn tired to do all this crawling, so I got up and went to the next fence, put the gun down, and walked over it. Kelly looked up at me and says, "What the hell are you doing, Lyons?" I said, "I ain't going to be worth a damn till I get to the top of that hill if I don't walk up there." So I walked up there and let loose with the gun as I went, We did push him out of there, and that night we settled in. And that night was interesting because it was cold, and I can remember taking my shoes off and wrapping them in toilet paper and a dry pair of socks to try to keep them warm. And then the next day we attacked down into Rohrbach and up into the Maginot Line. See, we didn't have the waterproof boots by then. Only the rear echelon had them. We had regular shoes and galoshes. And you do have a tendency to get your feet wet. But anyway, the next day I almost shot a woman. You read that?
Mm-hmm.
we were going through Rohrbach, and I'm carrying a machine gun, and in this house, the curtains parted. And all I could think of was, so just about the time I got to where she was, or what was there, I noticed it was a woman, so I didn't shoot her. Anyway, then we attacked up this long hill and took pillboxes in the Maginot Line. And I got put in a pillbox, set up in a pillbox, which had a big opening, and fortunately I was on the left-hand side of that, because about some time or another a German shell hit the pillbox right there. And the scraps went that way and killed 2 or 3 people. All they did was send me to the back of the room. But I thought I'd lost my face for a while. But then, anyway, and we had lost Poplar Inn. I don't know what happened to him during that night. And things were all confused. And then the next day they brought up food for us to eat. And I was lucky when I finally got in line to go up to get the food. I got a cold pancake. I've only been 3 days without food.
What did y'all eat? I know that y'all went days without food being brought to you. Did you have food supplies on you? I mean, did y'all have rations and stuff that you?
If you have, I'm still not sure which it is. Like these granola bars, there was a ration like that, and we'd try to carry that. And you'd carry 2 or 3 of them. So maybe in the course of 3 or 4 days, you eat 2 or 3 granola bars. Because I never, in the normal activities in combat, you couldn't carry those tins around where you'd have to heat it up and all.
So you spent a lot of time cold and hungry.
Yeah.
Between the Maginot Line, tell me about the distance between the Maginot Line and the Herrlichon.
What do you mean about the distance?
I mean, how far miles away is the two?
Oh, there was maybe 20 miles, 30 miles, where we were fighting and binding Rohrbach. It's one area, and Herrlichheim is down here near Strasbourg, or just north of Strasbourg. But then, we got pulled off this line and for Christmas and relieved for a while.
Tell me about Christmas Day and Christmas time for you men.
All I can remember is we had fairly good something to eat, but that was usually dangerous.
Why would that be dangerous?
Well, there was a 75% chance that if you started eating hot food, you'd get diarrhea after eating the cold stuff. I can't remember. We had Christmas in the binding barracks that we had taken out over.
So you had been in battle about 2 months?
No, just for Christmas time, just about a month.
About a month. Okay. Do you feel like you had, as a soldier, had grown a lot in that 1 month? Did you think you knew by that time what to expect? What you were going to be experiencing?
No, I guess I got a kind of a feeling that this was a sample. I didn't get any strong feelings one way or another at that time. I was just going along. I kind of expected it to be like this, and So I wasn't surprised. That's about all I could say. I don't know. During that period of the first month, didn't get feeling one way or another, really.
Okay. Tell me about the interactions, how you felt towards the other members of your squad. Did battle kind of pull them together in any way, or can you talk about those relationships or the group, how the group worked together?
Well, I kind of felt you're not restricted to the first month, are you? Your
Yeah,
question.
I mean, yeah, from Barclay into that. I mean, you've been there together for a little while.
No, I didn't feel that it worked as you'd expect a group of, 10 or 12 men. It was kind of disjointed at times. And camaraderie that I had was with a few fellows like Jensen from another platoon and Gardner from the squad and maybe a couple of other people, but camaraderie in that sense of the word, no. Or, we were together, but I wouldn't use that word.
So y'all were kind of, instead of seeing yourselves as a
Team.
team, it was sort of a...
Well, we're a team, but not, we didn't know when to hand off the ball and when to do what and where to go.
Was that because of the situation, of the chaotic situation you were in, or do you feel that was a leadership problem?
Well, later on I'll tell you what the answer is. It's leadership problem.
Okay. You don't want to talk about that right now?
Well, sooner or later it'll come up.
Okay, well, you want to talk about it now?
Well, it happened at Herleshheim.
Okay. We'll go down the road a little bit then. Okay. Is there anything you remember specifically before you got to Herleshheim? Any activities, things that happened to you in that 20 miles before Herleshheim?
Well, we were put on, rest areas or this or that. We had a formal ceremony to remember the fellows that had gotten killed, which Woolfolk was one, I don't think Poplar Inn was in it. And I can remember when we were in Scharnberg, I think it was, my friend Jensen was in a house where they ran into a cache of wine. So I got a bottle of wine. Well, you got a picture of me with a wine bottle, don't you? And whereas our squad didn't have that. And I got pretty teed off at the half-track driver we had, Massant, because he was a big blowhard. And I said, well, let's step out back and have a fight. And I thought, well, no, because he was a big blowhard, I figured he wouldn't. But he did, and he knocked me down 3 times.
How does that affect your relationship? This was your driver? How does that work out in every day? And you just kind of put it aside and keep going?
I do remember before Herleshheim, some fellow came back that had been put on reconnaissance. And he was describing his running around in jeeps with the rain on, and everybody had their tents over them so they couldn't see anything. And he says, everybody, we never found out anything at all. So, and the message was that when we took off for, originally it wasn't Herleshheim, it was Gamsheim, oh, there's just a bunch of German Home Guard units in that area, and we're just going to mop them up. So I don't know what the true story is after reading it in the last 20, 30 years, what intelligence did or did not know. But from then on, I learned one lesson in retrospect. Don't pay any attention to the intelligence your business tells you. Make sure you see it yourself.
Do you mind telling me about, you had lost some comrades, and when you're in war, how do you deal with that inside yourself?
You know, I can't really tell you. I don't know how to describe it to you. When you initially go in, this is my experience, you're scared. But you understand being scared is a finite time period. Then fear takes over, because fear is 24 hours a day and continuous. And you get numb to a lot of feelings. And it eats on your inside. You get numb, tired, I don't really care. And yet, I don't know. Some of the people getting shot and all, I think, well, this is to be expected. And as much as you rebel against it, you got the, it just takes attitude away from you and all of that. And it must have taken a lot out of me, because my wife claimed 7 years and I only thought it was 5 years. But after I got married, if she came in the bedroom and I was sound asleep and made the wrong noise, I was up out of bed ready to go. And she says that lasted for 7 years after the war. I thought it was only 5, but you get to the point where, yeah, you're sorry, but you don't have any emotions. You're almost drained like a robot walking around.
So to preserve self, you just kind of have to put kind of an armor of survival, an armor of survival around yourself, maybe?
What do you call it that? It just... I mean, you do. When your friends get shot, you feel it. But you've also, in order to survive, you got to almost do away with feelings. You know what I'm trying to, I don't know how to explain it. But you're almost in a fog and just going along.
You just described it very well. Thanks. That's a good way to describe it. Okay, let's get to Herleshheim. Tell me about that.
Well, the first day of Herleshheim, after all this intelligence about, we were discharged from our half-tracks near Wiersheim, you know, and took off across the plains towards Gamsheim. And our platoon was in the lead with another platoon and amongst all the tanks. And it was an interesting day, because the Germans started knocking out tanks and shelling the troops, and because I can remember seeing shells coming at me and bouncing off the ground when I figured, well, this is it. But they didn't. They didn't explode. I suppose they were armor piercing or something. And pretty soon we got to a point where they said, "Well, stop." And we were just laying there in the field, and it was too frozen to dig in. And Flip and I, that's Gardner, and I just sat there, and every now and then this tank would blow up or shells would, and we were picking shrapnel out of our faces. And then pretty soon, middle of the afternoon, some guy that was on the right-hand side said, "Oh, they just got hit." And looked around, and sure enough, I walked over, and there was Fuchs and Shoemaker, who had just joined us, had been hit by an artillery shell. That was the other machine gun, and had gone up. And then we were watching, trying to see what was going on, and I went and reported to Kelly that I thought the Germans were firing from a particular point in the Steinwall Forest, because I saw some smoke over there. I reported it to him. I said, "Pass it on so they can." Anyway, these tanks, one by one, would get blown up and people would get shot. And we were just laying there for an hour or two. I don't know what the Dickens did. And then we were going to have an air attack, so one P-47 came over and dropped a bomb in the forest. I don't know what the hell that was going to do. But then near late in the afternoon, they said, "Well, we're going to withdraw." So, of course, the ones in the front withdraw first, and the ones in the rear, and that's logical, right? But 5 minutes after it starts, everybody's running. And we got to the canal and on the thing and tried to dig in, and we were lucky. We had a granola bar between Flip and I. And then the next day we attacked, and looking back, I was real fortunate. Remember I told you that the first platoon had been in the front yesterday. This time we would be in reserve, and the second and third platoons would be first. So when we got into town, I looked around the corner, and they said, "Well, just be careful." And you look around the corner, and there's a German tank sitting in the street, and pretty soon, I don't know who gave us the thing, but we set up our machine guns in the orchard looking towards Gamsheim, over near between the railroad embankment and the road leading into Herlisheim. We were on the south end of Herlisheim. And we were fortunate. There was a little indentation we could set the machine gun in, and people were running around, and I didn't know what was going on. And then in the afternoon, over about maybe a tenth of a mile away or something, 4 or 5 German tanks came across the railroad embankment in a line, followed by maybe 100 or so German infantry. Well, they were coming right straight towards us. Well, my job was to fire, right? So I must have been firing for the next half hour. 5, 10, 15,000 rounds, everything we had, at the soldiers. I remember Jensen came by and he says, "Well, everybody had gotten up and ran." I said, he says, "What are you doing here, Carl?" I said, "I got no orders to withdraw." As a matter of fact, I hadn't seen Sergeant Kelly all day. And the other machine gun that was in the other, only 10 yards away, didn't do a damn thing. So anyway, the forward tank finally stopped, and I could see the guy in him, but I should have shot him. But after he took his first shot at me, the artillery came in and plastered the area. Unfortunately, it had phosphorus shells in it, so the smoke you couldn't see anything. And so when the smoke cleared, the Germans had retreated. And half an hour later, they were down on the other side of the embankment, away from us. But then it started getting dark, and we saw all these guys in white uniforms going through the houses up to our rear. And I said, "Since when did they issue camouflage outfits to Americans?" And then it dawned on me, they weren't Americans, they were Germans right in our rear, and going through the houses. So I didn't know what the hell to do. And I went over, I saw some soldiers near the buildings of the the houses near the orchard. I went over, and there was a lieutenant there with a whole bunch of men behind an embankment. I said, you know, those German soldiers coming down down those houses. What shall we do? Just about that time, the Germans fired on the house right that was where I thought Kelly was, blew it apart. And then it got dark, and some of the men had come back into the orchard, and someone said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'll try to find a way back into town with the rest of them. And of course, you got to be careful. You don't want to get shot by an American or German. But I did make contacts, and went out and got these 25 men, and we went into Herlisheim, and nobody tells anybody what to do. And so Flip and I said, well, let's set up our gun in this first house. Unfortunately, we picked the house that faced away from Gamschein towards Weiersheim. And we set up the machine gun in the first floor window, and but in the basement were all these soldiers sleeping, worn out, I guess. And then at 2 or 3, it hit. The Germans attacked. All you could see was tracers all over the place, about that high off the ground. And they blew up the machine gun, and fortunately Flip gave me the right words. Let's go, Carl. So we snuck out the back in a break in the basement and snuck through the chicken coop. And we could hear Germans all over the place, and we meandered over all over that plain for alongside the canal too for a couple of hours till we finally an American column of half-tracks came up, and we waited till we could get to them before they could shoot us. And we made contact, so we were then with the 56th. So they took us back and said the 17th had been overrun, and so the next day they gave us a machine gun, so we set up with the 56th at Weiersheim to defend it. And then in the afternoon, Funk came by, the first sergeant, with 18 men. I think that was all that was left. How they got out, I don't know. But that's the day that changed my life.
Tell me about that. I mean, I know what happened. Tell me what happened in here.
Well, I came to the conclusion I didn't know what the hell was going on. But neither did anybody else. And those that were responsible had really screwed up or had failed to do their job. So I knew that you don't lead men by sitting in a house or sitting in your office. You got to go out and see what's going on. Because I said, well, I looked like all the time I was in Herlisheim per se, I never saw, the only officer I saw was the shh, which was a great command. And in a way, he probably saved my life, because otherwise we should have opened up on those Germans, and maybe I'd have gotten killed. But that was our job. And where were all these people that were supposed to tell everybody what to do? Where were the sergeants? Jensen came by and, well, I won't mention him, and said, over there by the railroad embankment earlier today, they'd come under fire from the Germans, and they were huddled up, and his sergeant says, geez, I wonder what we're supposed to do now. I mean, up to that point I figured I was just putting in what I thought a soldier should do. Now I saw what you really should do, and it wasn't being done. It changed my whole perspective, and I used it later when I got into management into my business. You manage by walking around. You don't manage by being in the CP. Because all these people who were in the CP were letting all these people sleep or do something. They could have done a lot more damage. Maybe more people got killed, but that was what they were supposed to do.
So you rejoined what was left of the 17th at that point?
Yeah.
After you got, okay. Did y'all continue in battle after that, or did you pull back and wait for replacements?
Next day we got I forget where we were in Wiersheim, and then they said they had the cooks and the bakers and everybody, and they lined us up and said we were supposed to recapture some bridge across the canal or something. And we were going down there, and the captain was out there giving us a handout. Gave me a pack of cigarettes, just what I needed after 3 days without food. We got out there, and nothing happened except being shelled and all that. But interesting, when we were with the 66 or whatever it was, we were lined up on this canal that had an embankment, and there were vehicles all lined up along there, you know, and every one of them has a machine gun on it. Some American Piper Cub comes, and by golly, somebody opened up on it, and every vehicle in the place opened up on this. They didn't hit it.
Oh, man. Did y'all have much air coverage at Herlesheim?
No, the only time I saw anything was that B-47 that dropped a bomb in the Steinwall Forest.
Was that the plan? Was that what was supposed to happen, or do you?
I don't know what was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Now, there are people that got all sorts of stories that I read afterwards, but I haven't read much about it. I'm just telling you what I saw or didn't see or something. See, you know, I learned one thing: intelligence. You got to be careful about what everybody tells you. 2, you got to really be out there and see what's going on in order to make decisions as to what you should do. And 3rd, you got to be with the men no matter what it is. And everything seemed to be screwed up.
Were you still a PFC in Herlesheim?
PFC, yeah. Right after that, they made me squad sergeant of the machine gun squad, and we started getting replacements.
So that at that point you became a leader.
Yeah.
And so Herlesheim taught you how to do that.
Well, in a sense, I guess you're right.
Okay. Looking at Herlesheim, you learned a lot of lessons and learned how to kind of lead men. Was that the closest you ever felt like this is going to be it? This may be my day. Was it that intense?
No, I never felt that was the closest. I thought they were all close every day because you didn't know when a bomb would go off or something happened. So that was it was the most arduous and most confused in a sense, but I didn't feel that I was any more likely to get killed there than 20,000 other places.
Okay, tell me about the morale after Herlesheim. What did y'all do to keep on going, or how did the Herlesheim affect you as a group of men?
Well, of course, we were scattered all over the company. 20 people are now had replacements of, what, 150? So we were busy getting these people trained and used to and trying to develop a team with them. So I think a lot of people just felt, boy, we were lucky.
How long did you have to train the new men, the replacements?
Oh, maybe a week. Just integrate them, because then we took off for the Colmar pocket, you know.
Okay.
Tell me about that. Are there things between Herlesheim and Colmar that stand out in your mind? Experiences?
Nothing that I could think of.
So Colmar is the next big
Yeah.
marker for you. Okay, tell us about that, getting to Colmar and how that happened.
Okay, I was, when we went to Colmar, I was on sick leave for one day. So they attacked Herlesheim, Prede Colmar, across an open field, and the 1st Platoon apparently lost its lieutenant, platoon sergeant, and somebody else, and somebody else, and somebody else, and I heard about it. But anyway, since I was on sick leave, I went into Colmar with the medics, where they had the first aid station and all that, and Kulikowski from the 1st Platoon was in, I forget for what, but anyway, he says, I'll take you back to where our company is. And so in the middle of the night, or early in the evening, we got back into this, and the company had taken half of the town. The Germans had the other half, and so that's when I got my big assignment, because I walked into the captain. The new captain was in a barn with some kind of light on. I forget what. Anyway, I said, I'm reporting back for duty, because I didn't know all that had happened. And he says, okay. I was a squad sergeant then of the machine gun squad, and I turned to go away, and I said, I don't know what I said. He said, oh, by the way, Sergeant, I want you to take over the 1st Platoon. I said, okay. He says, I said, where is the 1st Platoon? He says, I don't know. There's someplace at this end of town, but be back here at 4 o'clock so you can get orders for the attack tomorrow morning. So I had 2 hours to find all the people, appoint squad sergeants, and get them all together in the middle of the night and find them. But we did, and attacked the next morning and pushed the Germans out of Herlesheim, Prede Colmar.
Who was your captain at this point?
Ferguson.
Ferguson, okay. So Captain Hilton was already gone?
Oh yeah, he was captured at Herlesheim.
He was captured at Herlesheim. So yeah. Did you have respect for Ferguson?
I didn't know him.
Oh, okay.
I got to know him after this event, and he was pretty good.
Okay. Okay, let's get out of Colmar and tell me kind of what happened after that.
Well, then we got more replacements, and then we went to I forget the name of the place where the French garrison was, or had been, and we went on maneuvers, and then we occupied a piece of land, or in the baby factory. I'd have to look at my notes, but the Germans. This was up north, or northern part of the 7th Army, where the Germans had occupied this industrial complex, and we were on a hill overlooking it, and what else was going on anyway? Because we had my men all posted in places, and there we ran into the Nublerwerfers for the first time. And Nublerwerfers, you know what they are. That's the German rockets launchers that in a package of 6, I guess. Boom, 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 boom. And the acting lieutenant that we had in the 1st Platoon got wounded. So here again, I'm running that platoon. Then we were supposed to make a night attack with my platoon. Unfortunately, I got called off at the last minute. Because another outfit had circled around these Germans, and And then the next thing we were had it pretty easy going until then we started down, the Palatinate behind the Germans. Can we take a break?
Yeah.
Can he turn it off?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, we've gotten out of Colmar. Have we gotten out of Colmar?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we're headed down.
Well, we went on reserve for a while, and then we got attached to Patton's army, and went across the behind the Germans in the South Palatinate, and we were taking prisoners left and right. And you've heard Semprini's story, so I'll go into that.
What was it like? Were the Germans truly just kind of walking to you? What caused? Was it just they knew it was the end, you knew it was the end, everybody knew it was the end?
There was skirmishes a little bit here and there, but nothing significant. And actually, in one town, they greeted us positively. As a matter of fact, I went into what I thought was the municipal building and captured I think it was a Gestapo guy. When I brought him out, the townspeople clapped, hooray. And we got a couple times when we had all the vehicles together, we were bombed by German planes, but there was an awful lot of American air power, obviously catching the Germans retreating, because we'd run into where they'd have their columns, and you could see they were pretty well burned up. But and then we did on occasion run into serious problems, like when Flip Gardner was killed, because the Germans had a particular edge of this forest or road zeroed in, and they plastered the area just as we came out of it, and so I had to get up there and remove Massant and the half-track driver and give him first aid, and a couple of other people, and get all the vehicles out of the way and get us organized. And then that was another experience. I had these men all organized about 10 yards from the edge of the forest so that they would be ready. And the Germans periodically were shelling the place like crazy. And a major came down. I think he was I recognized him as being a member of in charge of the service platoon or something, a service outfit that had charge of maintaining the vehicles and all. And he came down and he says, "What's going on around here, Lyons?" Or Sergeant. I said, "I'd be damned if I know. We're just under fire here, and everybody's stopped. The tanks are stopped out there, and I'm just ready for anything that happens." "You mean you don't know what's going on?" I said, "No, I don't know, other than what I told you." He said, "Well, we're going to have to get somebody down here that really knows what's going on. Replace you." Just about that time, they plastered the area with things. He's flat on his back, and I'm just standing there leaning against the tree. He got up and said, "I guess I better go back to the motor pool." I do remember that.
So you were a real manager of people, weren't you? You didn't like that chaos stuff. I mean, I know it was chaos to be there and not know what was going on, but you knew about your men.
Well, I wouldn't know about them, but I'd go around and make sure everybody was this. Mm-hmm. Like in one attack that we made later on, I can remember going, while the Germans were shooting at us, these replacements would come in, and when they'd lay flat on the ground, like this, and I'd go tap them and say, "Hey, keep your head up. If you get shot, make sure you're seeing the Germans coming, so you know what's going on." And but I felt that was my job.
Did you, were you ever, several of the 17th were taken captive. Did you ever have some really close calls where you thought you were fixing to be taken captive, or?
No, most of them were taken Herlesheim,
Yeah. Okay, so once you got past that?
I might have felt I had a lot of close calls, somebody was shooting me, but not to be a prisoner.
Get us on down towards going across country and towards VE Day. Things
Well, that was
you
just one
remember.
series of small fights after another, one town after another, and for example, I can remember the one, I forget where it was just before Ob. The captain said, "Oh, your platoon will take the left-hand side of this little village, and some other platoon is going to take the other side, and you're going to maintain it so the whole combat command can drive through and beat on down the road." So we took that. I organized the mortar squad to fire in there and we took that side of town with fire now and then, and the combat command took the main road right on through town and down there a couple miles, and every now and then my radio man would get, the captain would ask, he was down the road a couple miles, I guess, "What's going on?" He said, "Nothing." And we were getting machine gun fire from way up in some hill, and pretty soon radio man came to me and said, "The captain wants to talk to you." And he said, so I got on the radio and he said, "Lyons, I understand you, it's the machine gun fire from him." He says, "I want you to go and wipe that machine gun out." Well, I looked around the situation and I called him up. I said, "I'm not going to do it. We're maintaining this area so the combat command can go through, and I can't even tell you where that damn machine gun is, and to hell with it." He gave me a little chewing out at the end of the day, but I didn't. That was also the day I looked for something to drop on my shoe. My father had broken his little toe, so he was in a cast. Well, by then, in my platoon, there must have been at least 150 people had gone through, and I was getting tired. And you mentioned how this feeling where you get the fog, tired. I thought, maybe I can find a brick or something, drop it on my foot and break my little toe so that I can get relieved. Because I had had people shoot themselves in the toe in the platoon. I even had to threaten to shoot one guy that kept pulling a bunch of malarkey on me that his leg was bad, and the medics told me that, and another fella said he couldn't aim his gun, so I said, "Well, we're going out to fight. I don't give a damn what you do, just pull the trigger and make a noise. Shoot it up in the air. But you're going." But I figured I'd had enough. The odds were getting slimmer and slimmer and slimmer. Because Licky and I, by that time, were the only ones left in the platoon.
Only two left.
But then in Ob, we had a neat fight. They dropped my platoon off to clear a little village. They didn't know what was there. Sure enough, then the combat command moved on, left us there, and sure enough, at the other end of town, we ran into 200 or 300 Germans. But they were ready to quit after a couple shots, and so we put them on the road and said, "You just take off down that road until you find some MPs will pick you up." And so we rejoined the combat command overlooking Ob, where they were having a serious fight. And some major came up to the major in charge of the combat came up and says, "Lyons, I want your platoon to go mounted across those fields on the right-hand side of Ob and wipe out anything that's in there." So we take off in our vehicles, run right into a ravine. It was so deep, and so you couldn't get a vehicle across that. There was a stream there. So I dismounted them all and started going up one side and down the other, and I had half of them out in the plain and half of them in this ravine. And then they came under machine gun fire from the Germans. They really let loose on this. So I had everybody that was out of there, plus the half-tracks, fire randomly at these buildings out there, and I went out and tapped every man on the shoulder that was out there and told him to run for the ravine. And then we moved into town that way.
You were out there telling them to come back? I mean, you were going out on the plane and telling your men, come on back to the ravine?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, that was my responsibility.
Oh,
You couldn't hear that far,
Mm-hmm.
so you'd have to go out, and guys would be sitting, laying around, you know, so you have to go and tap them on the shoulder.
Did all the men in your position do this, or did they send somebody? Normally, would they just send a messenger out and go tell the guys to come back? Or was that a part of your hands-on leadership?
Well, I can't really tell you how the other ones operated under those circumstances. I know the the platoon sergeants we had, Semprini and Ruma, were real good. You could depend on that. Like Ruma and I, one night we got into some town, and Ruma said, well, we're supposed to set up a defensive position or something. The order came down, and Ruma said, and when Ruma and I got together, and said, where the hell are we supposed to be? Nobody could tell us. So he said, well, let's you and I put our platoons together in a defensive position and to hell with everybody else.
So y'all kind of had just to lead and do whatever seemed appropriate at the moment, because
Right.
nobody was going to tell you what to do.
Well, not
Generally.
Yeah.
You knew to go that direction. Yeah. Okay. What was the last battle that you remember?
Well, the last one I remember now was that AIB deal, because shortly after that I was made acting first sergeant, which was a big break for me. Now I figured I might survive, because I'd be 100 to 200 yards behind the line instead of out there in the front leading the men. Of course, that's where I learned my next lesson. You heard that one.
No, go ahead. Well, I did, but go ahead. Tell us about it.
The second day I'm acting first sergeant, Jeep pulls up beside the half-track with a box full of paper. And he said, you acting first sergeant? I said, yeah. Well, this is from battalion. And we're fighting our way at the Germans. And second item in this box full of paper was a memorandum on what to wear when on leave in Paris. I couldn't believe the crap that battalion was sending down to a combat unit in the middle of fighting. And but I suddenly realized that this war wasn't the way I figured it. Very few people were really fighting. The rest were all managing. So from then on, I hated paperwork, even to this day. They can tell you where I worked. Lyons was not in favor of paperwork. I said, all these people out here are worried about is living. They're not worried about when they're going to go to Paris.
Oh, wow. Tell me about when you found out that it was over. How did you find that out, that experience?
Well, I think they just said we're going to. The message came down that it was over and we're getting pulled off the line, and we went back through Munich and we're kind of relieved. But by then the people that, like myself, that have been through it all were exhausted. So, there's no, so it's Christmas, But I'm sure others felt differently, or more enthusiastic or relieved.
Out of all the men that were in, can you tell me the number? There were 2 of y'all left.
In the first platoon.
In the first platoon. Can you give me kind of a ballpark figure how many of the 17th started and survived to the end? Do you have any feel for that?
Well, I would say it can't be over 50, because that would include the cooks, the bakers, and all of those types of people. And I don't know how many cooks and bakers and all that stuff they have. But, the 18 came out of Herlesheim. So they were the combat parts, and then there were the cooks and the bakers, so maybe it's only 30. Well, that went through the whole thing then would be less than that number, because some of them got shot, like Flip Gardner. Oh, and a number of the half-track drivers got hit. I think when Flip Gardner got killed was the day I felt the worst, because he was my closest friend in it, and that was the day the major came down and asked me what the hell was going on.
Did you stay in contact with his family? Did you ever?
No, I never knew his address.
Okay.
Now, I've known some other people that I know real well that were replacements, and Ludke and a couple of other people, but I didn't, and I should have.
Okay.
But you know, you can get interesting insights. Fuchs, I told you, got killed at Herlisheim. I think I wrote his father a letter, because he was a big gun in General Tire or something. Anyway, and then I got a letter back from him that I suppose made me withdraw more. He was sorry that his son, he said, since my son got killed, would you please export, what do you mean by steal? Export, what's the right word? Liberate a couple of those fine German watches and send them to me. I didn't understand that motive when one had lost his son. So from then on, I guess I was I withdrew a little bit, except for what I, had to do. And then there was all these replacements coming in. I got lost. I couldn't remember names anymore. Pretty soon they were just, somebody on the somebody. Because your mind doesn't, you're in that fog, and of course you realize you're only getting a pinpoint view of this effect of the war.
You've told us that you learned some lessons about leading men and about paperwork and some things like that. Are there any things looking back now, or maybe right then looking back, your perspective on what you did and your feelings about your experience that you haven't told us?
Well, at one time, for many years, I felt guilty of one event. I remember I told you in Herlisheim that in the early part of the evening, after all was gone, these Germans were coming down the buildings behind me. And I had moved the machine gun around, but the darn sights got clogged up with condensed breath or something. Mm-hmm. And I always felt guilty that I didn't open up on them instead of going over and seeing that lieutenant that says, shh. Because maybe I could have started a fight and killed some Germans, and it wouldn't have made much difference, but that's the only thing I ever felt guilty about.
What made you give that up? Time? I mean, where you didn't feel the guilt. Was it just time, or just...
Well, I talked to a number of people, and they said, well, you're here, what more can you ask for? Yeah. So I don't feel too guilty today.
Yeah, good. Is there anything that I've left out that you really want to share with people who are going to have lived 30, 40, 50, maybe 100 years from now about your experience or about who you are?
I don't think so.
Okay. I would like to ask a question about the 12th Armored Association. What has it meant to you?
Well, it's a chance to get together with some of the people that you knew and renew some friendships and get there. I didn't join until 10, 12 years ago. Because when I came out of the Army, I didn't want to joined the American Legion, the Veterans of Far Wide, one didn't belong to anything. But DeLuca, my friend in New Orleans, paid for my membership for a year, and so I was a member. And we've kind of enjoyed it now and then. Mm-hmm. Yesterday was perhaps the best day, the memorial service and then the Holocaust of any of the ones that we've been to. But I'm not an association type in a lot of ways.
Okay. Has it been a good, do you feel like you dealt with your Army experience, growing through it, who you are, or do you feel like the association, your relationships help you to carry on life and get over that experience? I'm sure it was hard.
Well, I didn't think much about it until 10 or 15 years ago. And I can talk about it without getting but the association, all that I learned in the association, somebody will tell me of a story that I didn't remember, or some event I didn't remember, and that sort of thing. But they don't help me get over anything. I'm over it.
Okay.
Well, no, I'm not over it. And I'll never be over it. Because your generation is making sure that what I did was a waste of energy. Look at what's happening in this country. I went in and, as I told you, I became a machine gunner because I thought that would be, like I could say I fought for it. And what did I fight for? All I got to do is pick up a newspaper. Now, I'm trying to put that into perspective, but it does irritate me. What I hear going on. No discipline in the schools. Parents don't take care of their children. This area here is a fiasco. There's no... Well, sometimes when I reflect on it, I think I was crazy to have the views that I had, or have. Understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Now, I know I'm peculiar that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a different age. It's a different
Yeah,
time.
but that's everyone talks glibly. Different. Change. Things have changed. And I tell you point blank that the basic good relationships between me and you, me and you, and you and them, and me and my wife have not changed for 10,000 years. You understand what I just said? Yeah, the buildings have changed. This has been changed, but not basic human behavior. Well, it is going through cycles, but and we're on the down cycle right now. And what it'll lead to, I don't know. I just hope I die before it gets to the bottom.
Self-destructs, maybe. Yeah. Well, I sure appreciate your time,
Okay.
and I appreciate you letting us use this. And